Welcome to Mindful Drawing. I'm Robert, and I'll be your guide on this meditation practice that enters a space of mindfulness through the act of drawing. This week I'm a little under the weather, so I'm going to jump right in and hopefully make it through without any things coming forward, but I was a little behind and not really planning out how we would engage this exercise, and a colleague had recommended a book to me recently, and it was sitting on the coffee table, and I hadn't had a chance to open it, so I read through a little bit of the beginning and started flipping through the pages this morning. This book here by Ungers is a look at city metaphors through morphology, or the forms they take, extracting from things we might see in our mind and see in the planning of a city. There's quite a broad range of exploration, some quite obvious looking and others more playful and fun in terms of how cities have been drawn and examined, and then how we might see them with our own eyes. Some are very precise and some very broad, but interesting little pamphlet, thanks to the colleague that recommended it, and I thought that could be a little inspiration. So for the exercise, I'll ask you to imagine an image, a metaphor in the mind, something somehow related to city. For me, it's a seed, a small bean or a germ that grows out and can produce some form of organic metaphor to the city, but it could be anything: spiderweb, donut, inner tube, spiral, anything that you think could be an interesting city or that you've seen as a city. But if you'd like to follow along, the small seed or germ is where I will build from, and we'll work out from that metaphor a light sketch and imagining a seeing that image from the mind come out loosely on the paper with a bit of pencil, and then I'll go in with some pen, anything will work just fine, and start to add some of the elements of cityness to it. We'll look for some walls, some streets, some little buildings, some parks, and any other areas of interface with the surroundings to slowly ground it and let it change from that metaphor in the mind, going beyond the image into a place, a world, building it out there on the territory of the paper. This exercise might ask you to do a lot of imagining, so feel free to go anywhere where it takes you, and if the drawing doesn't end up being a city, that's totally fine. It's the starting place, the idea, and we'll see where it takes us. So go ahead and gather your supplies, establish your space, and let's draw together. We can start with the metaphors. They're a good place to start, because we vaguely have an image in the mind of what we might be interested in. So on that idea of a city, I thought we could bring to mind a little bit of a metaphor that might resonate with us, so each would be a little bit different, of some image that might represent a city. And think maybe like a city from above, maybe drawings you've seen, or maps or plans. For instance, some cities are donuts, some cities are spiderwebs, some cities are boxy grids, some cities are squiggly lines. But anything could come to mind, and what I thought of when I started thinking about this morning was that all cities start from some little seed, and maybe that little seed could be a metaphor to begin with. So I will begin with a little bean of some kind. So you can follow along there, any kind of bean you like, small lima bean, big lima bean, small kidney bean, some kind of bean, or seed of any kind, sunflower seed, lettuce seed, whatever might come to mind. So we first start with just thinking about that place of germination that can grow out into a city. Again, you're going to follow along with the idea of a bean or a seed, or come up with any other thing. So a little warm up just to think it through. Right? A seed could be something as simple as an almond that we're used to eating that just has to it a bit of shape. And as we think on that shape or think on the image in our mind, we might kind of recognize that something like that has texture to it. So just some lines and veins on the skin there. If you split one open, maybe it's more about what kind of happens on the inside, or it's got a couple other little layers of things, the kind of protective energy, glucose, layer, some fatty layer, and then the germ layer somewhere in there. It's different ways that different seeds could happen, maybe more of a bean type situation that you might find in a pea or a shell. Bean of some kind that has a roundish shape to it and some little place where it branched off from its pod. Whoa, a little tiny mustard seed. If anyone grew up farming or gardening and had to plant mustards, they have teeny tiny little seeds. Tiny little black seeds that are really hard to find. You can draw them a little bit bigger. But they're just little round pellets. You have to look at them up real close with a magnifying glass to notice their differentiation. Probably quite similar to a little bean there as they branch off from a bigger cluster of things. Maybe little grape seeds. Got that kind of sharper almondy shape, but a little bit more point to them. Little skin on them. Or anything else that starts that journey in the mind. Again, kind of like the bean today, fun shape to draw. You have quite a lot of variation to it coming in around that, and since they're always different, you can let them be all sorts of different. Take some time there if you want to just think through what might start out for a city, whether, again, it's the bean thing that I'm thinking of, or perhaps something else creeps into the mind. I think I'll start just a little bit lightly in pencil for the bigger drawing, but then move over to some pens to have some control of detail and edges as we work layers from that metaphor into another representation, another meaning. As you bring an image to mind, either through sketching out on the little scrap of paper to kind of visualize it, see it in front of you, or just with a few breaths, closing the eyes, thinking it behind the eyes, thinking of an experience with that metaphor, noticing some of its shapes, figures, geometry, the lines, the planes, the surfaces, maybe the points they gather. And watch the image flutter in and out. Holding one for a long time in the mind can often be challenging as it washes over with something else, but it flickers back in maybe from another point of view or a different resolution. Noticing that for a few moments, a few breaths, letting it be at the forefront of those waves of thoughts. As that coalesces and you feel ready, we'll find a place to begin. It's a connection between metaphor and image and city. It can be very flat, so we don't have to worry about perspective or 3D. We can just kind of draw from a single point of view what it looks like and work from there. No structure needed. Find a place on the page, again, maybe loosely or lightly, starting with a little pencil, something that doesn't mark too heavy as you kind of figure out the beginnings. And then you can move to pen or just push a little more with the pencil. And start loosely shaping from the mind that image of a bean or seed. A nice tense curve formed as it grows into its kind of inflated space. A little crook or a hook somewhere that shapes its little connection back to the stem, the umbilical little belly button of the seed. And now it completes a bit of a shell there. It doesn't have to be a perfect representation of a bean, just getting the rough shape in there. It's a place to start with the image, the outline, the profile, noticing it. Feel free to make any adjustments as you want, and maybe a couple notes of texture or surface, flatter areas or more curved areas, darker areas, or not, but not too much detail, just getting a start to it. And again, any other metaphor is fine. We're just roughing in a basic shape, maybe a large diameter area or a few key lines moving through the page, setting it up. And once it's there, we can think a little into the metaphor. What does it bring to mind? We have some idea of the growing of things or the forming of things from a place like this, a change, a weak spot in the membrane. Its first roots or sprouts will come out onto the paper. And we don't have to be too literal. It may have several that branch along, creating a little veining, rooting structure out beyond the base of things. We don't know what they are yet, it's just the germ, the start of something. Dividing up some of that empty space of the paper, suggesting potential growth into something else. And then, if you've ever watched a bean sprout, maybe soaking them or planting them or something like that, a seed sprout, they often split along this outer seam, and the first leaves, the cotyledons, start to force their way out. A little leaf-like, but a little held in a funny way. So some kind of thing that bulges out. Again, may have a little bit of stem to it. It is not quite formed yet into a leaf. Another beginning to capture some more space, something loosely feathered there. And multiple could come out, whether that's how it really happens or not. But maybe one comes in more than one direction, just reaching out from that initial sprouting point, forming the starts of some leaves to grow, sprouting there on the page. With that loosely sketched in, some very bean-like qualities, I'm going to switch over to some pens to bring some detail and resolution to it, but feel free to use whatever medium's handy or what you're like working with. And it may be that the thing you begin to sketch has some of the very literal qualities of the image in the mind. The bean, the branching, the web, the roots, the leaves, the flower, whatever it is underlying your exploration here. I think we can begin to shift some of those to another scale, another realm. So, for instance, cities may have walls or roads or blocks of buildings or houses and yards, depending on how you envision them. Cities may be on the coast of something, along a river or sea. Cities may butt up against mountains. Cities may have streets at different sizes. Cities may have centers. Thinking those things through, letting the metaphor shift, oscillate a little in the mind, paying attention to that overlap between thing you see and idea you imagine. And I think I'll find a place starting with the outsides, the walls, the edges, and how they meet an environment. Maybe this city has some heavier walls along an edge. It's nice and smooth and clean, built up to keep something out a little bit. Maybe some water, maybe up against an edge. We don't know yet, but we'll just start by giving it some wallness, which is a thickness more than a line. Two lines moving along each other, two curves, passing by to have a material consequence for a little while. And that first act's transforming away from the quality of the underlying image and into potential for something else. Looking along it, thinking where else these conditions could happen. Other smooth edges may become a wall thickness for a bit. Fortifications to keep the city in, keep the environment out. And some of those may have gaps in them if we think of gates and passages, but if they fill in, they fill in. We can come back along later and begin to add detail. Now, just finding some walls, some boundaries of separation. Some of the harder edges that move their way through the paper. Gaining a thickness. And now we're just following the image underneath. The little idea of a seed or an image that could be something else. Some of those curves forming out to walls, hard edges. We might look now for some other things related to those. Perhaps features of the area around. If those walls hold back some water or some mountains, maybe there's a place to extend some shapes. Perhaps a coastline. A nice beachy area. Disappears into deeper rocky areas wherever the walls might be. Curves following and extending out, imagining some lighter lines that work their way around here and there. Other areas may just meet the outer edge of something, perhaps forming up into roads that ring around, similar to walls, but we'll find ways to bring difference to them. A tracing over of the edges there, letting the imagination play with them, or just trace along. Let the imagination find it later. If things are veiny or light or gridded, perhaps they become more representations of streets or roads. Thin, light pencil lines can get a little offset with a thickness to them that we see as carvings into the landscape, leading back to the place of starting at the city or heading out into the territory beyond. Tributaries, transportation, movement, extension of one define domain through another. And we may have lots of space inside those walls as well to think about in a similar way. No necessary metaphor to guide them, though maybe some of the textures from your initial sketching are there, or there's just some empty space. Either one gives us plenty of room to let the pen move around. But if we start with things that are there, it can give us a beginning to the idea of how things shape and look. If our roads are organic and winding or gridded and straight, and they may be different inside and outside, the routes traced beyond the walls, following the landscape, following routes to resources or just accessibility. The routes inside the walls, more tightly packed, more dense and clustered, could have a similar visual language or become their own thing. Up to you as you imagine where things could go. Perhaps this city works in layers, the veins of a leaf branching off, similar to the veins of the roots. Streets happening in a different way than we might be used to. Reaching out through open space to carry the nutrients of city life. And as your imagination starts to read into what's there, let the starting image drift back and forth into the mind. A little time here and there to remember the start, the seed. Then shift and oscillate to whatever comes to mind when you think streets, maps, buildings. The hand is busy. Excuse me. The busy hand keeps some of the senses busy and engaged. And that gives a little space for the imagination to work, not having to be so attentive to the processing of those elements. Let the imagination play its little game. See what it might find. And don't worry about continuity the consistency of the connections between things, the little bits and starts, just the moments of intersection. Can work them into the narrative of the drawing as we work our way along the ideas. Little rings and veins growing out and along, around and through. Two lobes here, they could have very similar structures, perhaps. Another series of divisions, slowly breaking up a big space into smaller and smaller textures. And again, in the recognizing of the original metaphor, the start of thinking about this idea, whatever that image might be, it has more layers of qualities to it, more layers of potential shapes, changes with time. As we think it through, things like a seed grows, germinates, builds its leaves, builds its texture, interacts with the sun, changes color, and those might inspire new little ways of looking at everything. There's a lot of room to let the stuff still develop. Maybe some buildings, maybe a place of park. No need to define what they really look like, but perhaps there's something larger here and there, or the little moments that work around a block, the membrane of a cell, the slight division of things into little chunks, finer and finer grained. As the growing network defines regions or trajectories, and begin to fill them in. And any little moment can become a new chance to fill in layers and layers depending on the size of things. And the canvas becomes open to new interpretations if you want to bring in some tone or texture or color, shading. You can start to differentiate the elements that get lost in the accumulation of lines. Perhaps the walls get a little shading to them, a little darkness to stand out as heavy elements, holding elements that bound the things. Perhaps the streets get a light shading, a surface that connects things. Buildings stand out as blocks just bound by their edges, the light outline giving them more and more definition. And over time, something there catches your interest, an idea. What if this could be a place, a city grown from a seed, a bean, a city based on a spiderweb, or whatever other metaphor started the journey? You can keep drawing in layer by layer, maybe look up a little bit of inspiration in city map drawings and plans, or just imagine your way through the elements that we're all familiar with around us in daily life, in some degree or another. This place has some nice big parks, soft areas with fun paths, little trees. The brain will start to fold in what it's seen, what it likes, what other metaphors it has to city until it becomes a real place there in our imagination. But as we approach the end of the exercise, it's a thing in progress, it's a developing idea, one we can return to in our imagination and in our expression here with the drawing. But as you feel ready, you find a place of completing some form of idea, maybe a shade, maybe a division, a blocking out, a breaking up of big territories into smaller and smaller zones. You can let that come to a close. Find a place to put the pen or pencil down and just examine what we found there for a little bit. You may still see the beginnings of it strongly represented from that initial seed of an idea, or perhaps it's faded away into the background of detail. Take a few breaths with it in the mind. Let the image you see merge with the image behind the eyes by closing them for a moment and just taking those closing breaths. When you're ready, reopening them and seeing the image in front of you fresh, trying to note if they stay separate or if they blend together. Well, there's the beginnings of something there, and I think maybe a few layers of tracing paper, or a few more rounds of getting control of the systems at play and the ideas unfolding from that initial starting point, that initial metaphor. We could have something going on there. A little seed of a city sprouting into the land, unfurling into the waters, creating the start of something that who knows where it will go in 1,000 years. Perhaps eroded back into the ocean, absorbed back by the mountains, or a bustling metropolis. But since I'm feeling a little run down, and we'll let this one rest where it is, maybe come back to it in the mind and exploration at another time. If you enjoyed the exercise, please let me know in the comments what you found through your germination of this city idea through metaphor and shape and form. Share with your friends and give it a thumbs up. And subscribe for more episodes of Mindful Drawing. Usually every week, we'll have a new way of exploring our own internal mindfulness,